we have had with us during this academic year a wonderful Fulbright scholar, Yevhen Fedchenko, who is from Kiev, Ukraine, and is himself a scholar there. And he met Jerry Swerling a couple of years ago when Jerry was in Duke, and met Jerry, and Jerry came back bragging about the school and what wonderful work you all are doing. And so now, a couple of years later, we ended up with Professor Fedchenko with us, and having spent a year here at Annenberg. So at the beginning of our time, we talked about having him do a director's forum that would sort of enable him to give us an observer's view of Annenberg and what he is going to be taking back to his journalism school at Yale. So this is that overview, and I urge you to give us some critical remarks as well. And he says he won't do it. So during the Q&A, I want some questions that will elicit critical remarks.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. It's really great pleasure to see so many people here interested in hearing my probably quite trivial thoughts of what I observed here. And for me, it's quite a sad opportunity because it concludes my year here. It ended very suddenly. It's really very close to the end of this mission. And I really would try to give some interesting perspective of what I've seen here, and hope during Q&A you will be able to press me hard to go into critical stuff, because I was preparing all the night and looking through all my notes and couldn't find any piece of critical thought. I'm so sorry about that. I would be very positivistic and very complimentary. Sorry. So as a Fulbright scholar, I had a privilege to spend the whole academic year here at Annenberg, and being a part of such a great school, I had the opportunity to observe, to absorb, and to reflect on the present and future of journalism education, and trying to imagine if Annenberg model can be relevant to education of future journalism somewhere in other countries, and particularly in Ukraine and in the school, Mogila School of Journalism, I had the privilege to lead. Before sharing with you some brief results of my observations and my meditation on the future of education in our field, I want to thank everybody who has spent time sharing with me your knowledge and experience during this year, and all the people here did that, so thank you very much for that. Prior to my arrival here in late August, I even did not expect to be so fully embraced by Annenberg family that allowed me to be totally immersed in great experience, learning and educating myself. So I became almost a student for this year, learning and looking at what happens here with one very small relaxing moment of not having midterms, finals, and it was really great. It's really great to be a student without midterms, finals, deadlines, just do what happens and enjoy it. My very special thanks go to Geneva for your vision and great atmosphere of the school that inspired me to be a better director and not being afraid of bringing more changes and making more difference in journalism education. Another very special thanks go to Jerry for inviting me here, for inspiring me to start a new program in public relations back in Ukraine, and for being my mentor. These were three main objectives of my Fulbright granted research. First, how to make journalism education relevant and innovative, and what it takes to have successful and at the same time ethic-based program in public relations at Annenberg. And the third objective was to start the program in digital storytelling or documentary, and I was working very hard with Dan and Megan and had some classes at the school for cinematic arts as well, to absorb a lot of experience in that field and try to imagine how to start that kind of program, which is really very needed today in Ukraine. So I was looking into all these things, and when I was approaching people with questioning how to make all these things successful, they were joking, okay, if you figure out What is the recipe for success? Let us know. We would be very nice to enjoy your recipe for that. Well, I agree there is no easy answer to the issues of relevance, innovation, and success. One can argue that you cannot take Annenberg model and replicate it in other sides of the globe. But if we try to deconstruct these big issues into smaller ones, we might get a chance to understand how to reinvent educational model to serve journalism and communication in times of uncertainty, collapsing old models and imagine new ones. For Ukraine, collapsing models is not a big novelty. We live through transformations already for decades, but the key to the success of transformation is a vision and strategy and good model you can learn from. And this model might be Annenberg. For me, there are three capstones of Annenberg model. First, great faculty. Second, great students. And third, modern, very up-to-date curriculum, which brings faculty and students together and create a great lab for advancement of journalism education. I will stop very briefly on the importance of each of these three elements. Faculty. The reputation of any great university is based on the reputation of great faculty, who are leaders in their field and are well known for their professional and educational achievements. One of the biggest failures of journalism education in Ukraine was inability to bring people with professional experience to teach as professional track professors or adjuncts. As a result, the courses were very often taught by people who never worked in media. Annenberg is doing a great job bringing people with so different professional backgrounds to teach, and those who teach continue their creative activities, writing, reporting, producing and shooting documentaries, or being successful professionals in public relations. This greatly enrich educational process and validates credibility of education in the eyes of students. Faculty can inspire students, being interested in their success and learn from students. Here at Annenberg, I did not notice a glass wall separating faculty and students. I never saw vertical mentoring from up to down. Instead, what I witnessed were professional, driven relations between peers that continues after graduation. This creates a feeling that students aren't just taught by someone, but they're an equal part of educational process, and I really appreciate it. The next, students. Because of Annenberg reputation, you are able to attract those students who are specifically your target audience and want to be the part of this very school, especially at the graduate level. It's really very important not to have just students, but students who specifically want to come to this very school. Sitting in different classes and meeting Annenberg students at extracurricular events, talking to many of them to get their perspective, I can say that you can hardly find more determined people. Many of them have some or substantial journalism or public relation experience and very well articulated feelings about our profession and our world. With many of them we became friends, including on Facebook and Twitter followers, exchanging information and ideas and evidences of their professional growth and success. What can be more important than having faculty and students on the same page in their understanding of profession? What can be better than to see their stuff published in LA Times, their reports from Middle East, or job with Reuters, or AP, or Weber Shandling? Another important issue is curriculum. When you have something really good, it's very convenient to think that it was always like that. It's the same with curriculum, but it's not just true. We know how dramatic the changes are and how different it is compared to, let's say, 10 or 3 years ago, and how painful usually is curriculum changing process at every university. If you look at the journalism curricula through the world, you would be amazed how they differ from country to country. But what all of them have in common, they are completely medieval in their approach to teaching journalism, ignorant of reality and reflecting more current level of expertise of faculty rather than expectations and demands of media world of tomorrow. The critics of orientation of curriculum on media demands usually say that it is an anti-academic approach because media industry is quickly changing, or because it's shallow sometimes, or because it lacks self-reflective perspective. But that's a place where our students are expected to be after graduation, and our mission is to prepare them for this job. It was a strategic decision here at Annenberg to pioneer the changes in journalism education and embrace the changing in media rather than lament about that. That brought a number of great courses and reputation of innovative school, recognized by educational and professional communities in this country and in the world. By the way, I mentioned Twitter earlier, so I started to use Twitter after one of my first rounds here, when I said last September. Of course, it was Robert and Andrew Glass. I realized if I did not do that, I just would not be able to function as a part of modern society. So thank you very much for pushing me into that field. Another great achievement was to include new media, social media, and digital journalism components within many other courses, even those very unlikely to be technically advanced, like educational reporting class Bill was doing using iPad. This ability to respond quickly to the real-life indicators and demands and opportunities of the market makes teaching much more interesting and relevant to students who are going to adopt new technologies with us or without us anyway. And such updated curriculum makes their job prospects much more real, even under such unfavorable market conditions for the global media industry. At the same time, doing an amazing job of giving cross-platform, universal journalism style reporting experience, Annenberg is offering more specialized journalism courses and programs than probably any other journalism and communication school in this country. That brings in students with very different professional and academic background, from culture and arts to public diplomacy, and create a unique blend of in-depth knowledge and expertise. I will totally second Geneva's vision that schools should shift from learning lab to major media players. It brings a unique experience of learning by doing and doing by learning. Today, you do not need much in terms of technical facilities and delivery platform to reach your audiences, and price for entering market is very low. Very often, media produced by students can do what traditional or legacy media sometimes fail to do to reach specific audiences and communities that were below media radars for that or another reason before. That's why I became the big admirer of Annenberg Digital News and of Neil and Tommy. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Alan. Impact Project, thank you very much to Dan and Megan. Annenberg TV News, radio, they are not just labs operating in vacuums, they are highly recognized media players, very often successfully competing with well-established media organizations. And that's what I really want to bring back to my school. Another field of expertise where Annenberg is leading is entrepreneurship, and understanding how business systems and models work for media. Combining new courses, guest speakers, and research projects will definitely help future journalists be successful in navigating emerging models and shape them as leaders of changes. One more important element of education I want to mention, and again I want to bring it back to my school, is not only what happens in classes, but what happens outside of classes. Annenberg is a place with enormous potential to learn, to meet new people and new ideas through numerous centers, events, ongoing discussions of media and journalism, like this Directors Forum, careers events, opportunity to students to face the life and to think about what they want and can do after their graduation, meet media professionals and know market better, understand media system throughout the world, their ethics, norms, and values. All that helps them to be included in the process and benefit from years spent at university. Before joining academia, I was a TV journalist covering international events throughout the world and was considering my job very interesting but extremely difficult because usually I was covering international conflict, crisis, disasters. But I could not imagine that being a journalism educator is even more difficult journey. You cannot learn the profession prior to being engaged in the process, but you can learn how to do it better So I want to thank Annenberg for this great year that brought enormous opportunities to learn from me and enrich myself, and for becoming my second alma mater. Thank you so much.
Questions? Comments?
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering, what do you think will be the biggest hurdles in translating what you have seen here and described so well? It's always interesting to have someone from the outside reflecting on what we're doing, and it always sounds even more exciting than when you're in the middle of it. But what do you think would be some of the biggest hurdles in translating it back home?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great question, because when we compare different journalism communication systems, always an issue what things are translatable through the borders and where. And I have found a lot of things which really can be very simply used back in Ukraine. And one of the biggest issues was how to make a relevant curriculum. And they have found plenty of ideas here, and to not take a lot of time to revise it and to make the improvements and make the curriculum even more relevant to what journalism is all about. Very often when you try to imagine how experience of one country can be used in another country, you can always hear the money factors. Because people very often think that in order to do something great, you really need a lot of money, as Annenberg had. But very often you can really make a difference without that. And it's not about money, and it's not even about the technical facilities, which really many schools around the world today can afford. Because again, as I mentioned, you really don't need huge investment into technical facilities today to broadcast, to webcast, and deliver students' output to those who would be interested to consume it. So it's not an issue anymore. You can really do a great journalism and communication school just having ideas. And I can find many examples of the schools who can afford many things Annenberg has, but do not have a vision where to move, and they stumble at some point and stay in one place at a time when you really need to move very quickly. And I mentioned a couple of new programs we want to start. Again, it's very translatable to the experience we have. We're really interested to start public relations program, but the biggest issue is not organizational one. It's always takes time and efforts to start a new program, but the biggest issue is an ethical one. Because in Ukraine there is very blurring line between public relations and journalism, and for us it would be really a big issue to make sure that journalists and public relations would definitely not cross this boundary between two very different professional fields. And it's really a huge challenge for all post-Soviet states. And we have David LaFontaine here, who taught at our school many times and taught through all post-Soviet countries, and he definitely can say that it's really a huge issue, and you can find a lot of examples of bribes in journalism, and people are trying to buy journalists, trying to pressure them on selling some kind of information as a real news, and that might be the biggest issue with starting this program. And I mentioned the documentary program, so it's really very important for Ukraine to have that kind of program, because it would really bring the fresh air into the kind of public media, because commercial media are not given the content which audiences really want to get. And if you would have journalists who will be trained in digital storytelling, they really can use the opportunities of the web to deliver the stories which were undercovered before. And believe me, in Ukraine you will find so many stories covered all over the media. And if we would give them an understanding to journalists how they can produce the types of stories, it would really be a great asset, and it would really promote democracy in a very direct way. So we're just not talking about democracy in general, we're talking about very specific things, how journalism and communication can deliver into helping build democracy in countries like Ukraine. And in very direct relationship between what we teach to our students, how we do that, and what kind of ideas they would have when they leave university after graduation and become media professionals. So the skills are very important, ethical issues are very important, and probably when you teach students here, you not always realize that many things that are taken here for granted are really very huge issues in many other media systems. And very often journalists really need to struggle to continue to be journalists. And Ukraine is one of the kind of media system where journalism are always under the pressure.
The pressure is from the government?
Numerous pressures. During Soviet times, we had only one pressure from the government. And when the Soviet Union disappeared, and these great pictures around this room can give you a glimpse of what moronic systems that used to be, we were sure that all the problems already gone, and now we have the new page to start, and the journalism would be beautiful and serving all those who are interested. It didn't happen because instead of one pressure from the government, now journalists have so numerous pressures from the government, from owners, from big business owning media outlets, from a lot of self-censorship from editors and journalists who really sometimes are even bigger censors than those who are outside of the system, because they really started to understand how the system works in terms of media economy, and they really want to see profits above any other issues of media activities. And so it's really very, boostering market with very murky rules of the games, and journalists sometimes, as I already mentioned, are even bigger enemies of journalism than people outside of the system.
Would you give us some observations of your judgment about the state of the media in this country at this moment of change?
Yeah, I think for me, it was a great year to observe what happens in media here and to, again, put it into comparative perspective. And I was following all major changes in the media happening here. And it's an interesting process. So it happens everywhere in the world, and probably some countries are coming to that a little bit later, like Ukraine. And just to give you one example, 4 years ago we started the program which was called the Digital Future Journalism, and we will have later this month a group of 30 Ukrainian journalists coming here, and we will have meetings with many faculty here at Hamburg. So when we started the program 4 years ago, it was about digital future of journalism, and today we basically are talking about the current state of the journalism. So in the US, this process started much earlier, and media professionals started to reflect where journalism is moving much earlier, and that gave a chance to make changes during these years. And some countries come to that much later, and as soon as we have globalized media markets, some countries are really in disadvantaged position because of that, because they compete with big media players, global social media plays, and if you come to realization how media industries change too late, basically you lose your position on the market and you cannot compete. And this digital divide is growing sometimes, and that was what I also observed, because here this discourse is very alive, and probably I was lucky to be here because so many things were happening and so many great speakers came to talk about that. But even watching TV channels, consuming traditional media, and of course consuming new media, I could say that even within this year, so many things changed. And personally, I welcome the change because I used to work for television when we were using datacomms, and that system was very unmobile, I would say, in reaction to what was happening in the world. And journalism now can be much more easily grasping the new things, and that probably gives a big hope for journalism, and those journalists who are easily adapting to the new things, they really can benefit. And those who stay behind and say that we are losing journalism, we should do something, basically that's, I think, that's wrong position.
One of the things that I was struck by from your Twitter feed, actually, was your take on the different reactions to the revolutions in Egypt between Ukraine and the U.S., where you said that in the Ukraine, people were, very pessimistic about it. They're like, it's just going to be the same old thing. Whereas in the U.S., we're very optimistic about that. And then, being here amongst the media in the U.S., where it's maybe not clinical depression in the media, but it's not far short of it. Is there still that kind of divide there between optimism and pessimism between the two industries?
I think you can always find optimists and pessimists coexisting together in any country, and I think in Ukraine today you can find more optimism. Included in media, again because of the new tools arriving, and journalists are really feeling like they have many more options. And I mentioned earlier the issue of censorship. So if we look at the opportunities offered by internet, it's not only the tool for good reporting, it's a tool for backward censorship, because in Ukrainian case, for example, you can use internet to avoid censorship, to struggle government efforts or someone else to block information or kill the story. So it really gives new opportunities and new options. And of course, there are journalists who are using that, and journalists who cannot imagine how it can be useful. And that's okay, but the issue is which camp is prevailing in this struggle. And the tweet you mentioned was prompted by the idea that it's just half of the work to do a revolution, any kind of revolution, orange revolution, internet revolution, or to be involved in that. The biggest issue is what kind of objectives you want to get from them, and how you use the new opportunities arising after that. And Ukrainian Orange Revolution, for example, was a great event with a lot of lost opportunities after that. And Egyptian Revolution, we still don't know exactly what the outcome would be, but probably it would be the same. So there are those people who do revolution and those people who then try to steal the results of that and use it for their own ideas, and the same with the digital revolution. So if you know how to use that, and if you can really grasp that very quickly, it really might bring the very unexpected results. And for example, the program I mentioned with Digital Future of Journalism is bringing tremendous results because journalists who are part of the program are so eager to get new knowledge and new skills that just after leaving the newsroom at our school where they were taught something new, they immediately start to implement it and use within their media outlets. And it's really great that by the end of the day, literally, you can see the results, and so they are open to any kind of knowledge, new knowledge, and people who can help to realize how to use it. You can find many, many examples when it really helped in Ukraine and other post-Soviet countries to bring very fresh air into political life, public sphere, economic sphere, just giving people some new tools.
You mentioned some of the pressures on Ukrainian journalists and some of Ukraine's neighbors, including Russia. The very practice of journalism and looking into corruption can be extremely dangerous, and there have been murders of some, as you know, very prominent Russian journalists. How dangerous is it to do investigative reporting, to look at systems, corruption, that sort of thing in Ukraine?
It's really dangerous. And just one of the cases to mention here is Gongadze case, which was in 2000, and it's still not properly investigated when a journalist was killed and beheaded. And now the former president of Ukraine is under investigation of allegedly ordering that. So you can, and all the journalist was trying to do to try investigative reporting and just publish the things out on the internet. And so it's still dangerous, and people are risking their lives to do the project. And it really discourages many journalists because they know that they can risk the physical danger. It really stops some of them from going further in what might be very great and bright stories to tell to their audiences. And you're right, the situation is very similar in Ukraine and in Russia, where in Russia probably more state is trying to be involved, and in Ukraine you can find in numerous ways in this game, but the result is pretty much the same. Those who consume only traditional media will definitely lack essential information to understand what happens in those countries. So if you rely only on television, you will never know what happened. And another trend is kind of infotainmentization of traditional media, especially television, and in Ukraine probably you will find it even more than anywhere else here in the US or in the Belarus. So it was a kind of ideological vacuum. So in Soviet times there was no entertainment, there was just no independent journals, there was just propaganda. And then when the system changed, kind of vacuum opened and everything you were blocked from just started to be thrown into the media system, and now one of the challenges is to find the quality of journalism and kind of investigative reporting, community reporting, and one of the solutions here can be more kind of journalist-run project, citizen-run journalism, and other small media operations which really can bring the fresh outlook into the journalism.
Did the Orange Revolution change the way that journalists were perceived, or change the role that journalism played in Ukrainian society?
Yeah, I think before Orange Revolution, the state of journalism was at its lowest point in terms of the trust, because audiences were consuming that information, and at some point those who can make judgment at least realize that media are among the least trustworthy institutions in the country, alongside with the government, president, political parties, parliament. Yeah, so the media were in a good company, and it was very disturbing. And when Orange Revolution started, journalists were divided in how to react into that, and some of them were ardent supporters, and others were waiting to see who is winning, and just to bandwagon in the very last minute. And then, of course, they were the biggest promoters of Orange ideas, those who were waiting until the last minute to jump on that, as it usually happens again. And it was quite a sad story, but anyway, it was a turning point for journalists, not for media owners and not for media managers, but for journalists to understand that you really build in the long-time relationship with your audiences, and you cannot trade this trust for the immediate benefits. And after that, the journalists became much more united in their intentions to keep the journalism off the outside pressures, and we have seen the number of trade unions created and groups to defend journalistic values, and it really brought the fresh start to journalists to struggle for their right to be journalists.
Are you guys getting hit with the Kremlin-sponsored DDoS attacks the way they are in say, Kazakhstan?
Not as far as I know, but with internet, I mentioned there is a big, it brings a lot of opportunities, but also it really can be controlled if the government is really intending to do that. And fortunately, Ukrainian government is not enough internet savvy to imagine that it's already around, just to give you one example, when current president just was inaugurated, the next day we had the Russian president coming, and as a part of the protocol they had the wreaths to memorial brought. So, and there was an awful weather and a huge wind, and basically the wreath just fell into the face of the president, which is absolutely okay. I mean, if there is a bad weather, you cannot do anything about that. But what his entourage basically was intended to do to prevent all the video reporters from reporting that. So they started to collect videotapes. They didn't know that in camera you already don't have videotapes. And that you have many journalists with iPhones doing all this stuff. So basically in 10 minutes it was on YouTube, and by the end of the day it had 2 million hits, and the next day there were a huge number of different mashups, video editing, with all the... So basically what happened, just trying to control media, they make themselves looking ridiculous, and after that they didn't try to collect videotapes. So it was a good example of how the system works, and sometimes governments are really funny. And during this Digital Future of Journalism program, we had another big objective, not only to give a kind of internet literacy to journalists, but also to give them the opportunity to understand how they can use alternative sources for spreading this information out if someone is trying to block the traditional channel delivering the information. So that's critical.
Any students have any questions? Come on, students. He bragged about our students. Show your stuff.
Well, this relates somewhat to Dave's question, but what would you say was the status of the journalists in Ukraine and the respect that they're held in? How does it compare to the United States?
I think we still have many years ahead struggling for the status of journalists, and many people do not understand, still do not understand after 20 years of independence and building the new kind of political system. Many people in government, in audience, in non-government sector do not understand what media are all about. And so we still have plenty of homework to do. And of course, status brings responsibility. And that's what Ukrainian journalists, again, very often are lacking. And that's really undermines their status. And very often you can really see a very poor level of journalism, very, as I mentioned, very blurred line between journalism and something else. And you cannot bring from outside the understanding of what journalism should be about. So we can do thousands of trainings for them. I think U.S. government spend hundreds of millions of dollars to educate Ukrainian journalists how to be a good journalist, giving them one-day trainings, 1 week retreat training somewhere, 1 month, or bringing me here for the whole year, but you cannot bring the understanding from outside. If you do not feel inside what you want to do with journalism and with your profession, you basically cannot be taught. So we can start doing that from students and every time explain and discuss our values between ourselves, but it's pretty difficult to do with more seasoned journalists who still probably have a solid ground with them, and their attitude didn't change much in terms of how they pursue journalism activities. And so that's a big issue, how to achieve status and then achieve it, how to keep it on the level where people would really respect journalism as a profession.
There was a question next to you, right?
Regarding distribution infrastructure in journalism, is there anything that you've seen or learned or worked with at Annenberg that you think Ukraine would benefit by adopting? Twitter, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, there are many things that we would try to do, and one of the things which I'm going to develop after coming back is to start something like Neontomy, because we have plenty of students' creative output, but it's all separated into different courses, and there is no one platform where it can be delivered as a media course. So we should change that and do not do just the silos of different reporting within different courses, but try to find how to bring all the content into one place and then to bring it to the audiences, because sometimes what journalism students are producing is of much higher quality than the journalists in Ukrainian media organizations can offer, and sometimes it's much more objective, higher quality, better done in terms of skills used. And why would we not offer that to the larger audiences as alternative source of information?
There was a question or two back here.
There was a question back there too.
Who has a question?
So you were talking about the difficulty of maintaining an objective, professional, and ethical core of journalists in the country, considering that they come under pressures from a lot of different areas. How difficult is it going to be to maintain the integrity of the school of journalism in a system like that?
It's a great question, because we struggled for that since the opening of school in 2001, and we really struggle with other schools which are on the market for quite a long period of time, because what they are offering is still continuation of Soviet tradition of journalism education as a literature education. And very often you would not find much understanding that journalism education should be different from that, and that you should change the system of journalism education, and everybody would benefit if all the schools would try to change the system, not just one or two schools trying to make the difference. And it's really difficult to keep the integrity of the school because of outside pressure. The school should be licensed and accredited through the Ministry of Education. Very often, ministry has its very own understanding what journalism education should be about. Very often, your efforts would be evaluated by the people from fields other than journalism, from literature, natural sciences, and for them it's really very difficult to grasp what journalism education should be about. As for me, it's very difficult to understand how journalism education can be authorized by the state through the Ministry of Education, because it really should be peer accredited as it was here in Annenberg, and it should be supported by industry, because they really can know better than the Ministry of Education what happens, and what they want from our graduates to do after graduation. And many other pressures, but again, they are a part of the larger process of struggle with history. And it's a very painful process, and the history is not given up easily. And especially if you have not that much same-minded people around, it's very difficult to bring systematic change.
One last question, Emma, you had, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead. Sorry. You, I had.
You were very generous about, comments about our school. I was just wondering if you have any advice on things that we could do better.
It's really very difficult to find things what you can do better. There are many things you can improve endlessly. In journalism education, there is no a kind of a golden feeling you can reach and then stop, because again it would bring a kind of stagnation, and after stagnation you usually just drop back, and that's again what our experience is showing. What really was striking for me is enormous number of everything happening here. It's really great, and sometimes I couldn't imagine how this can be managed, but as we can see here, it is managed, and it's well managed. And so I really wish to have more schools doing this great job of offering such great opportunities to students and to faculties for their development. So for me it was a really difficult task to find something to criticize today. And probably you would not believe me, but that's just because you're all inside the system and you take it again as a everyday routine, and you probably would appreciate that greatly if you would have a chance to go to other schools in different parts of the world, and you would see the huge difference, and you just cannot imagine how difficult sometimes the task of having the school like this is.
Can you find things to criticize in American coverage of international affairs?
It's probably one of the biggest issues I have found about journalism here. As soon as my previous background was international journalism, I was struck by how few international events you can find on television. And if we mention, for example, Egyptian revolution, so it was basically done by religious and newspapers are doing much better job in keeping that, but we know about the closure of bureaus throughout the world, and having bureau was a great advantage to this media because that allowed it to cover the world. And now, for example, in Ukraine, we wouldn't find any U.S. correspondent. And for the country, where a lot of interesting things happening in terms of transition, it's really weird. And some, even in Moscow, you will not find that many foreign bureaus that we used to have during the Cold War times. And it's pretty understandable because it's all about media economy, but it's a kind of paradox because the world is globalized and at the same time it's strictly divided into clusters in terms of who is covering what and how and what kind of information you can find in any part of the world about other part of the world. And before that we were complaining that all the international coverage is going through so-called north, and to read about the countries from south you really need to go to the US media or Western European media, but now it's even good because there is no more unified media organizations which would be doing that coverage of the world. And so basically what substitutes that is the internet again, and we had a great presentation last week about the website which is doing international great coverage, and probably that's the way how to improve that. And we have some other examples where internet is doing much better job of doing that compared to traditional.
Well, except for flunking on the criticizing at this point. Thank you so much.
We're not.